I want to introduce to you Miss Sara Balch. She will be speaking to us about partnering with patients to accelerate cancer research. So please join me in welcoming Miss Balch.
It's always more complicated than you think it's going to be. We're going to have a tail. All right. Next, back. Okay, we're set. Good morning, everyone. My name, can you all hear me? Yes, no, maybe so? Yeah? Okay, great. If you can't, please say something, because I can hear myself, so I won't stop talking. So my name is Sara Balch. I'm coming from CAMPION, which is a nonprofit that was launched out of MIT and Harvard. It's a joint genomics institute called the Broad Institute. We're in partnership with Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which is Harvard's teaching hospital, as well as the Emerson Collective, which is a social change nonprofit out of California, and the Biden Cancer Initiative. So CAMPION is a nonprofit whose goal is to bring together as many cancer patients as we can to start to answer some of the biggest questions in cancer that we still haven't been able to ask and to answer. Things like, why do certain patients develop resistance while others don't? What are some of the genomic and molecular drivers that enable a patient to be an exceptional responder to a drug, whereas I may be able to take that drug and develop resistance within a couple of months? But before I dig into how it is we're doing this, we're taking a new approach to cancer research and generally research as a whole, I do want to introduce myself and then the team behind CAMPION. So this is an old slideshow. We're going to roll with it. So this is a bit about me. So I am part of a team made up of computational genomicists, of clinical research coordinators, of oncologists and molecular and cellular biologists, of public health administrators, and then myself. So I actually came to CAMPION as I was a fellow within the Boston Public School System teaching AP Chemistry, and it was only for 2 years and decided I'd been in research beforehand and more on the data analysis side and was really excited about the mission of CAMPION. So I joined this group of people all working together towards this common idea that right now we do not have a database. Just this. You couldn't hear me. Maybe not. All right, take two. Wrong slideshow and you can't hear me. Thank you. This is great. All right, well, I apologize. These slides might be a little out of the order that I know, but we're going to roll with it. So what brought this team together is this common goal of trying to create a database that doesn't just bring together clinical data, so what treatments was a patient on, but also brings together the genomic data. Can we perform sequencing on tumors over a period of time and bring that with a comprehensive clinical database to start to answer some of the biggest questions in cancer research? And so this is Sheila. She's part of one of our projects that we have in metastatic breast cancer, and it's words like hers. I'm a second-generation breast cancer patient, and I don't want my daughter to have this disease. That is driving so many patients to join our projects in what we're calling direct-to-patient research projects. So our ultimate goal is what I mentioned beforehand. We're a nonprofit that's looking to answer some of those big questions in cancer research that haven't been asked and haven't been able to be answered before. And the reason we can't answer those questions is because we're not able to make the same kind of discoveries that we used to be able to make with just a handful of patients that walked in the door. And so now, to answer those big questions, we need to work with not just a couple hundred of patients, not just the couple hundred that might walk in through the door of MD Anderson, for example, who have metastatic breast cancer or who have a rare pediatric cancer. We need to bring together thousands of patients so that we're capturing every cancer story, both genetic and clinical, that might help us answer these questions. And so we need these detailed molecular and genomically characterized tumor samples paired with that clinical data to start to answer those questions. And so how are we doing that? So most of you are very familiar with the traditional research model, which is that I am patient X. I walk in through the door of MD Anderson, which has a research arm, and there's a clinical research coordinator that comes up to me and asks, would you like to participate in my study? And I may say yes, or I may say no, or I may not understand, and I may walk away. But if I'm a patient being treated at a community hospital in rural Maine, there is no clinical research coordinator asking me to participate in a research study. So I'm never going to participate in research, not because I don't want to, but because there isn't someone who's asked me to join them in building a resource that might accelerate discoveries in the cancer that I have. And so what Count Me In is doing, this model that I'm going to tell you about, is not partnering with an institution. It's not Harvard and MIT partnering with MD Anderson. It's Count Me In, a nonprofit, partnering with the patient themselves to accelerate research by building a publicly available genomic and clinical database that's free to anyone. So it's not saying, researcher at MD Anderson, unfortunately you can't access this data because you're not affiliated with Harvard or MIT. It's saying, any researcher across the globe, are you interested in learning about angiosarcoma, a rare soft tissue sarcoma? Well, hey, guess what? We've brought together all 300 patients that are diagnosed per year, and we've produced this database that might be of use to you. And so there are obvious challenges to doing so. If not, we would have done this a long time ago. The biggest of which is that 85% of cancer patients are not being treated in an institution where there is a research arm. They're being treated in the community hospital. I personally, I'm from rural Maine. I would have never gone to Dana-Farber to be treated. I've always gone to the same physicians and the same hospitals, and if I were to develop cancer, I likely would go to the people I know. But then we're not capturing my story, because I've not walked through the door of Dana-Farber and said, hello, I'm a cancer patient, team of research, clinical research coordinators, please ask me to participate in the study. There is no one at that community hospital that's requesting my involvement in research. And I may want to be part of it, but there's not an infrastructure that's been built to enable me to do so. But on the same side, for all of us who are so deeply connected on our phones and with everyone else in this world, we're entering this new age of social media and the acceptance of technology and the ability and willingness to be part of movements that weren't possible beforehand. I couldn't connect a patient from Texas with a patient from Maine, with a patient from Arkansas and say, hey, you all have the same cancer. We're all working towards developing a resource for your cancer. Would you be willing to come together and join this movement? And so for those of us who are visual learners, myself included, I did want to make, I made this just yesterday, a clear infographic to show what's the difference between what we are calling patient-partnered research and the traditional research model that you all are probably very familiar with over time. So the traditional research model is the one we all know, right? Where it's a patient who walks in the door of your big research institutions and some clinical research coordinator comes and asks them to participate. You then collect their data, you perform your study. If I'm an affiliated scientist, I might have access to the data, but we all know you probably won't have access to that data. After a couple years, maybe we've published something, maybe we haven't, and that's it, right? There's no one else that's going to be knocking on the door, asking to use that data and continue making discoveries on it. So this is restricted, again, to those patients that walk in the door. So what happens if you start knocking on the door of any patient that has cancer? I don't care where you live, independent of who you're being treated by. If I ask you, do you want to join a movement to build a database that brings together genomic and clinical data, would you say yes? And so that's what the direct-to-patient research model works on. So Count Me In, which is the colorful bubbles in the middle, is the nonprofit that we developed out of MIT and Harvard to do just that. So we partner with patients directly, independent of the institution you're working with. We're a single institution IRB. We are part of and sponsored by Dana-Farber, but we work with any institution that a patient is being treated at. So for example, the Metastatic Breast Cancer Project, which is one of the projects we have, We currently have over 1,700 different institutions being represented by the now thousands of patients that have given their consent to help us build this database. And if you add on top of that, it's patients, it's agnostic to the institutions patients are coming from, but it's also agnostic to the institution a researcher is coming from. We're releasing data, this sequencing and clinical data, de-identified as it's generated pre-publication. So I'm not making discoveries on it before I release it to you to be able to make your own discoveries off of it. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a bit. And so this is Count Me In. This is the research model that we've developed. And we have a number of daughter projects within specific cancers of interest, and we hope to do so for many more. But Count Me In serves as this umbrella nonprofit that enables any patient who wants to be involved in research to sign a consent form, sign a release form, and be part of our movement to build this database that will help researchers across the globe be able to start to accelerate discoveries. And so our goal is to enable cancer patients anywhere, independent of where they're coming from, independent of where they're being treated, even independent of what disease level of progression they're at, other than, if we're asking only for stage 4 cancer patients, you may have been stage 4 in 1996, but you may be in remission over time. You're still able to participate in the study because every single person's story can help us continue to understand why that patient was diagnosed in 1996 and is still alive today. But someone diagnosed in early 2019 with the same disease has unfortunately passed away. So we have, as it stands, 4 different projects, a 5th of which I'm really excited to tell you about, that have already been launched. The first was the Metastatic Breast Cancer Project, where we reached out to the breast cancer community and said, we're building this database. Will you join us? Will you partner with us to help researchers accelerate discoveries within metastatic breast cancer? And it was honestly a little wild. I joined when we were just a handful of people, and this was kind of a proof of concept of, can you do this? Can you build a resource that patients trust and are interested in being involved in? And we had, and we're now up to many thousands of metastatic breast cancer patients that are partnering with us. And then from there, we said, okay, well, we can do this in a pretty large cancer, or a patient population where there's a number of patients. Can you do this in a really rare cancer, where there's no way enough patients would walk in the door of one institution for us to build a big enough cohort to actually make actionable discoveries off of? And so we launched a project in angiosarcoma, which is a very rare soft tissue sarcoma where only 300 patients are diagnosed per year in the United States. And that also, we now have over 300 patients who are registered, and we've already had 3 different publications cite the data that we've released to continue making discoveries on a cancer that is very neglected. And then since then, we've launched projects in the metastatic prostate cancer world, and then also within the esophageal and stomach cancer. And this map just represents the United States. We also work in Canada as well, but the different colored dots represent the different projects, and each dot represents the patients that are involved. So as you can see, we have patients from everywhere. This map actually pretty accurately represents the population density of the United States. And within the metastatic breast cancer, we represent all states. And so for this audience specifically, I thought it would be really important to show you behind the scenes of what's it look like when a patient decides they want to participate. You all are the cutting edge, the leaders within the world of patient consent and participation, and doing so with integrity. And so it's important to us that within our patient partnership motto, we're very transparent as to how this project works and what it is that you're actually consenting to, and what we do in the background to enable us to build this database. So the colors you can't see super well here, but in the top row, the colors are green, and those are the patient steps. Before we launched our first project, we did a listening tour, specifically with metastatic breast cancer patients, to ensure that our process would be as light a lift as possible. It was extremely important, especially as a single institution study where we were consenting patients from across the country, that it was easy and as low a burden as we could make it. And so for the patient steps, the first thing they do is they click Count Me In. They can fill out a survey if they want to. Each of the questions was developed with an oncologist specialized within the cancer that we're interested or working in. Every question is optional, so you may decide, you know what, I'm not really interested in providing that information, at which point you sign a consent form, and you can opt into different levels of consent, the minimum of which is you enable us to access your medical records and you provide a saliva sample. If you choose to, you can then also consent to allowing us access to any archived tumor tissue that might be sitting in a pathology department that we can then sequence and learn more about the cancer that you have. And then if you also choose to, you can consent to providing a blood sample, which I'll tell you about in a little bit as well. At that point then, you're brought to a medical release form where you list any of the hospitals you've been treated at. This enables us to request medical records directly from that institution. And that's it. That's the online process. And it can take from 12 to 17 minutes depending on if you want to actually fill out the survey or not. At that point, we have built an internal software system that triggers then a kit from our genomics platform to be sent out. They're literally the 23andMe kits. I forgot to bring one with me this time around. But you just spit in a tube, and then you send it back to us. If you've chosen to provide a blood draw, then you can obtain a complimentary draw at the hospital that you may be receiving your care. Or we have a partnership with Quest Diagnostics, the company, and you can obtain a complimentary draw provided by us, and you send that back to us as well. And that's it. From there, behind the scenes, is all the steps in blue that the actual study team does. So from your survey, we then clean and aggregate some of the questions that you may have answered, enabling us to start to build out maybe some cohorts of interest. Then from your consent form, we're able to determine what pieces of the project you will be participating in. We work directly with the medical records departments, which is actually one of the hardest pieces of all of this, to then request and obtain those medical records. We create very extensive pathology histories to understand what archived tumor tissues might be available to us across the country that we can request without affecting your clinical care in any form. So for example, we've gotten samples from mastectomies from 1996 or prostatectomies from 2001 that were sitting in a pathology department. No one's doing research on it because no one asked the patient if they could. So from there, we obtain a saliva sample, and if a patient consents to, a blood sample as well. We sequence those, perform whole exome sequencing, and then aggregate clinical data elements that we've pulled from the medical record along with the patient-reported data, de-identify that, and release it as it's generated into the public community for scientists to start making discoveries. So I actually have the exciting news, which is to say that we launched as of 2.5 weeks ago our 5th project, which is the Brain Cancer Project, to help us better understand primary brain cancer within the patients in the United States and Canada. And over the next few years, our goal is to launch projects in every major, rare, and pediatric cancer. It's independent of what pharma is interested in studying. It's if there's a cancer patient who has a genomic and a clinical story to tell, then they should be able to tell it and participate in research so that anyone can learn from them. That's institution agnostic, that's geographic agnostic, that's whoever you might be. If you have cancer, you should be able to participate in research. And so let's do that by building projects in every cancer that we know as of today. And so what's been actually really amazing is the patient response to this. So without prompting, we started receiving a number of patient selfies. These are patients with their blood kits specifically. These are some we pulled from the Metastatic Breast Cancer Project, where they decided it was so empowering to have been asked to join a movement, to be participating in research. They're like, hell yeah, I'm going to take a selfie. I'm going to share that with everyone else because it's really important to me that people know that I'm helping make discoveries. And so these are a little blurry, but one of my favorite ones is in the top right-hand corner. It says, "It's my B-Day, people say, do what brings you joy, and so I did this, and she sent in a kit. And we get these kits decorated and in many different ways. We've got stickers, we've got thank you, and to us it reflects that these terminally ill patients are so invested in participating in a research project they may not have been able to do so, that they're taking it upon themselves to actually decorate a piece of cardboard and send it to us. And it means so much, because each of those dots that I showed you in that map, it's a patient, that's a life, that's a story that we're bringing together to start to understand and answer some of those major questions. We also make sure to keep our doors as open as possible to any patient who may be visiting the Cambridge area and who's interested in learning more about some of the genomic sequencing that we're performing and some of the data that we're collecting. And so this is just a number of pictures of patients who have come to visit us. Patient partnership looks like this social media interaction. It looks like having patients be involved in ways they couldn't, but it also looks like being extremely transparent about the physical process. This tube is brought to this place so that you can track and understand what's happening with the data that you're providing. And I take these pictures here mostly for the quotes and to show you that we've got people from all over the country. We're representing any patient who wants to participate in this project. And I'm not sure, actually, I'm going to skip ahead. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is included in this deck, but I do want to talk a little bit about the actual data that we're producing. So we have medical record data that's being abstracted from medical records. We obtain saliva samples, blood samples, and archived tumor tissue, of which we perform whole exome sequencing on. That enables us to understand what are some of the mutations or the copy number alterations that may drive your cancer that might be different than what might drive someone else's cancer. And we release that into a website called cbioportal.org. This is a global website. Anyone can visit it, and I urge you to do so as well. If you want to visit Join CAMPION, you can find your way to cbioportal as well. And this is available to anyone. So you don't have to just be a researcher to look at this de-identified data. You can start to look at your own cohorts of interest as well. And so as it stands, we've had 13 publications that use the Metastatic Breast Cancer Project data. We've had 3 with the angiosarcoma data and 1 our own abstract that was just submitted off of the angiosarcoma data as well. And so our hope is that people can start to look at cohorts of interest and start to identify with thousands of patients that may not have been involved in the research that was being done beforehand. Can we start to see some of those needles in the haystack? Can we build those cohorts of women who are diagnosed with terminally, with stage 4 breast cancer, metastatic breast cancer, before the age of 40? Why? Why did one person develop resistance when someone didn't? Why was someone diagnosed with a rare soft tissue sarcoma, but the genomic mutation that they have is shared by their, brother, and that person did not develop it either? So with these cohorts of interest, we can start to look into some of those exceptional responders, those needles in the haystack, those rare cancers that we weren't able to look at beforehand. And I think I mentioned the survey beforehand, but for those patients who do decide to fill out the survey, we can gain very valuable patient-reported data and build out cohorts there. So for example, I personally am really interested in looking at any stage 4 prostate cancer patient who's received an immunotherapy or some sort of PARP inhibitor, and what mutations might be working in conversation with the drugs that they may be receiving that make them exceptional responders or poor responders and develop some sort of resistance. And so you can look at that patient-reported data, and I know off the top of my head that we have upwards of 54 people who are reporting one specific immunotherapy, and then I can start to pull together the other pieces of data that I might be interested in. And the exciting part, too, is that the data that we're collecting is by no means stagnant. So when we first launched, we were not collecting blood samples, because it was very intentionally so. There's no way that we were going to ask patients to provide a blood sample to people they've never met before. I mean, I wouldn't have done that too if a research study asked me to do so and I'd never met the person. And so, but then we worked with a number of patients who were like, hell no, you got to ask us. We're already participating in research, so why wouldn't I do that for you? And so we started collecting blood samples because we've now developed a much more precise technology to understand circulating tumor DNA and be able to capture these multiple time points in a person's cancer story. And we're at the point where we're going to start launching serial blood biopsies. So I mentioned a lot this idea of tumor evolution and drug resistance. It's a massive issue within all kinds of cancers. And so if we can start to obtain multiple blood biopsies over time, we can start to see that drug resistance actually occurring in real time. And then with the sequencing data we have, look into what mutations might be enabling a patient to develop that resistance over time. So we're always adapting the technologies as they come out and the questions that scientists might be interested. So I think I only have one more slide left, and this is my thank you slide. So we work with now thousands of patients within 5 different cancer types. And as I mentioned before, our goal is to do this within every major cancer, rare cancer, and pediatric cancer. So that's soon to be many thousands of patients. And this would not be possible without their investment in participating in research. And it especially wouldn't be possible without the now over 60 different advocacy partners, I'm not including those involved in the brain cancer project here, who have facilitated the conversation with these patients. It's one thing for us to make a website and hope people will sign up. It's another thing to have a trusted community member from these advocacy partners say to a patient who might be part of their community, I believe in this project. I want this to happen. I want to build a database that might help research. Would you be willing to participate, and would you join them? So all of us are incredibly indebted at CAMPION to these patient partners as well as the advocacy partners, and to all of you as well for holding incredibly high standards for clinical research. So if you have any questions, I'll be sticking around. I might have to race off a little quickly to the airport afterwards, but if you visit joincampion.org, there's an email at the bottom. It doesn't go directly to me, but it will eventually get to me. So if I can't answer your questions now, please feel free to follow up later. So thank you so much.